Hi friends, welcome to Law Chat with Girija. My name is Girija Patel. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I am a podcaster, I am an educator, I am a businesswoman, I am an entrepreneur, and I'm a lawyer. I truly believe in the power of mentorship through storytelling, and that's what Law Chat is all about. So whether you are in 6 months or 10 years of business experience, we can all learn from each other's experiences because we face the same challenges and we have the victories and we have mistakes that we're all making. So why not lean into them and know that we're going to be fine and we're going to be okay and we're going to be inspired. And of course, this is Law Chat with Girija, so we will be talking about some law at some point during the conversation. And if you love what you hear today, which I know you will, then subscribe to Law Chat with Girija and share the love. So grab your coffee, sparkling water, or wine, and let's dive in to the next inspiring mentorship session. Hi friends, welcome to Law Chat with Girija. I am so elated today. And why? Because I have my team with me today. I am going to be interviewing my team, the people behind the scenes, the people that make the magic happen. I literally could not do anything without them. They are my lifelines in my business and truly one of the most amazing humans I know as well. These women are exceptional in what they do, but more than that, they're truly great team members and just really help me out in all my gaps that I have here and there. Just right now when we were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, don't ask me anymore. Assume I've done nothing because I am literally coming off of a family vacation and school just started and life just seems pretty chaotic to me at the moment. But again, I can always depend on my team, Tanishka Kherajani and Gadd. I am so happy that you're here with us today. We all have team members in our businesses, and it's such an honor and privilege for me to be able to have this conversation with you and also introduce you to the world in the sense of this is what's happening behind the scenes. So I'm going to talk to each one of you a little bit, and then we can actually talk about how our synergies come together and how we collaborate and work on some projects together as well. But Jamie, tell us a little about yourself. Tell us how you came into this, becoming a BA. You are literally you're like my right hand and Tanishka's my left hand. And so it's kind of like we all need to work together. But tell me, how did you get into this?
Well, long story short, I owned a business for 16 years, went through a divorce, had to start life over after all that time with 3 kids to raise. So I was like, hey, I run a business. I know how to do this. And that's what I loved doing. I loved being able to be the behind the scenes person and being the support person for the person in front of the camera. That's why you never see me. But I love being able just to be there to support people and especially women in business. And I just really love doing this and being there to help them out. And with running businesses before, it's kind of a good fit there.
Yeah, it truly is. When we first met, which was some years ago, I remember it started off as, okay, Jamie, I actually don't remember what tasks were there. All I know is today it has evolved and you are literally the PR person in the company. You connect with guests, you connect with clients, you're connecting with everybody, like third parties with regards to publications and things like that. And that is something that's very important in a business. And it's so nice that, you are that person that's doing that. And I know that initially, I actually honestly can't remember what the regular tasks were before, but it's really evolved into this. And it's so essential that, we have that in our business, especially with Law Chat and the podcast that we're doing. But not only that, even with the client work and then also, getting honored or getting some type of recognition as well. So it's been really nice to have that one person on the team that is literally the go-to who's doing that. But hand in hand, Tanishka, you're also super essential because you're kind of getting all of the other behind the scene things done. And I mean, you are so young and I'm always like, wow, this is amazing. And, you started a business at a very young age, which is exceptional. And you're also doing business outside of where you live and you're connecting with clients globally. You're not just restricting yourself to, your hometown in India. And so tell me a little bit about how you got into this and how you even got inclined into helping with the podcast and social media.
Right. So it's my favorite story to tell. I call it the $30 gig, and it really goes far to show the importance of the small opportunities that you get in life. So I still remember it was 2020 when the lockdown first started. I was at home. I always wanted to do YouTube. Like I always wanted my own YouTube channel, but never got the chance. I was still in my second year of undergrad when this happened. So, I was in this group for YouTubers. Basically, it was a group hosted by another YouTuber, and she used to share growth tips and, how to grow a YouTube channel. And I was in there learning. And I remember this wonderful, wonderful woman posting in there that can someone help her with creating an intro. And me being a media student, she just wanted someone to, create like a small montage that played before her videos started on YouTube. And she was like, can someone help with that? Because I can't figure this stuff out for myself. And I was like, I am already editing my own videos. Might as well give it a shot. And so I commented that, hey, I do that for my channel. And here's the link. If you like what I'm doing on mine, maybe we can connect and I can help you out. And so we did. That very same evening, we had a meeting. So she's based in the States, of course, and she was in the Eastern time zone. So it was morning for her, evening for me, and we connected. And, she told me that she wanted 6 of those videos done for her channel. And, she was like, how much do you charge for this? And I was like, I don't know how much I charge for this. This is my first time. I was like, I'm going to charge you $5 for each one of them. And so that was a $30 gig. And she was like, we had so much trouble figuring out how to remit the money internationally. It was my first time. I didn't have my PayPal set up or anything. And so we ended up figuring out that, she transferred me that money, and I was like, I was out of the world. I was like, oh my God, this is happening. Like, I did it on my own. And, it was just $30. Not to say that $30 is an insignificant amount, but it's a really small amount for a lot of the people listening to this podcast. And it was not like a big deal. But for me, it was, this is something that I'm doing on my own. And this is something that, it's mine. It's completely mine. I did it on my own. And so I remember that, she asked me that, do you also help with social media stuff? And do you also help with this and that? And so I really started working quite regularly with that client. And she's still a client after 2.5 years in business. She's still a client. We work together on and off. And she was actually the first person that I ever edited a podcast for. And I still remember I used to charge $10 for one edit, like an entire hour-long podcast. I used to charge $10 for editing that. And, in hindsight, that's like really low. So if anyone's listening in this industry, please don't ever charge so less. But yeah, it was my first time. And I was like, I don't even know how to edit audios, right? From video to audio. She was like, give it a shot. I have faith in you. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And so I did. And, now it's one of like the major things that I offer in my business. So I think that's how most, if not all of my services came into existence, is that I gave it a shot. And, it somehow ended up working out. And, here we are. So now I'm like offering a bunch of services and working with amazing, amazing clients like yourself from around the globe. So, yay for me.
Wow, I love that. And truly, I think we started working in 2020 also, because that's when my podcast launched. And I remember at that time, my coach, she was helping me find somebody for podcast editing, and I didn't know anything. Like, I was just like, I'm just recording right now. Like, just tell me what to do. And she connected us together because she must have put something out there. So it was actually really nice. And no, you were not charging me $10 a video at that time either. That is crazy, though. It takes so much work to edit, and especially sitting and listening to every single podcast. That's at least minimum 30 minutes, if not a little bit. Mine's a little bit longer. But I love both how Jamie and Tanishka, you found an opportunity and you actually didn't let it go. You were like, we're going to do this. I'm going to do this scared. I'm going to do this not knowing. But I'm also going to let them know that, hey, I'm not really fully aware of this, but I'm still going to do it. I really admire that, because I think a lot of us, when we're starting businesses, it's really tough to do that. The courage to pick ourselves up and move forward is really tough. And so tell me a little bit about some of the challenges you might have incurred or, had when you first started, and how did you overcome them? Jamie, you start first.
Well, for me, it was just, starting, even though I'd run businesses before, just still learning how to do it as a VA and growing and figuring out what I enjoy doing. It was a lot of just going in there and doing stuff and then finding out, okay, this really isn't something that I love doing. And that's what's kind of evolved with me, is just, I found that I work a lot, just kind of oddly enough, kept getting attorney clients. And I used to always want to be an attorney, and I had to work with so many before, just with with my other businesses and everything. And so it's like, okay, this is kind of weird that that has worked out. So, and then I've loved doing a lot of the PR stuff. That's just where I've kind of found that I really enjoy that niche of figuring out, okay, how to find people, how to get out there, how to network and do all of that stuff for the clients, even though I don't love doing that stuff for myself, oddly enough, but I enjoy doing it for other people and just coming up with creative ways of thinking outside the box of how can I get my clients connected with other people, and how can I find, like, I love finding guests and everything for the podcast, and I love researching and doing all of that to figure out, okay, who would be a good fit for the show and how to approach them and get them on and all of that. So it's a learning curve of just kind of jumping in there and having the courage to do that, which is scary a lot. And you have the, the imposter syndrome, the, should I be doing this? Am I good at this? And, you feel like, especially after owning a business and everything, I feel like you feel like, hey, I'm a jack of all trades, but master of none. So you kind of have to realize, hey, I am good at some of these things. So going through those steps early on, especially having to start over in life, is a challenge, but it's been a nice progress along the way there.
Yeah, I have to say that the guests that have come through Law Chat are exceptional. And I would have never met them but for your research and for your suggestions and recommendations. And truly, I am floored by the caliber of every single person walking through. And I just find being on a podcast such a blessing to be able to connect with other people around the world that I've never said hello to, even just because of the nature of geographical limitations, right?
Right.
But with Zoom and after 2020, we realized that we can transcend all of that and connect globally on a different level. And it doesn't have to be just through an email. And so I think even in 2020 is when a lot of the evolution was happening for a lot of companies, including us at GBP Law, because not only we had just started a contract template shop back in April of 2020, but then zoom to August, September, and we're like, okay, let's start a podcast. It's like, it was amazing because I remember that time, what I love most about the teamwork that we have is the flexibility that comes into each of our roles, and we're not allowing ourselves to be boxed into anything. And I love that because that's one of the mantras of my life, is that I don't want to be boxed in. If you say no to me, please hold my coffee while I show you how it's done. I cannot handle the no's. And I love working with team members who have the same type of mindset. There's no limitation. It's just how can we find the solutions? And Jamie, you're really, you really help in doing that. And so it's nice to work alongside someone who can help you do that as well. Again, I keep talking about the evolution because truly it's been an evolution, like in any business, even Tanishka, with you, we started off as podcast only, and now we've evolved into other things because, again, you took that leap and you were like, hey, listen, let me take care of your social media. And I'm like, I'd rather give it to somebody internally than hire somebody externally again right now. And it was, again, such a blessing. But Tanishka, before we get into our podcast and how we do it and how to start a podcast, which I really want to talk about that today as well, I really want to hear also some of your challenges because, again, you started your business when you were 18, 19, like you were quite young.
Yeah, one day before my 20th birthday.
Yeah, and you were still finishing up college and doing all these things. And so what were some of the challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge for me is that, like I said, my first client was from the States, and majority of my clientele has been from the United States. So, every once in a while, a person would come along and they'd tell me, they'd have a meeting and they'd be super impressed with the work that I do. And they'd be like, okay, go ahead and send me a quote. When I send them a quote, they'll be like, how come you're charging so much if you're based in India? I'm like, you would not ask that to someone based in Europe. You would not ask that to someone based in America. Why would you ask that to me? So basically, there's this misconception that just because that expenses is not as high, which is, of course, it's not a misconception per se. Of course, the cost of living is higher in Western countries, but that doesn't make my work any less, important, and it doesn't make my effort any less worthy of your money. So I think I feel like I have also evolved into the mindset where, if a person comes up to me and they tell me that I shouldn't be charging so much because of where I live, it's a red flag. Like, it's not about you wanting to work with me anymore. I do not want to work with a person who has that mindset that just because someone is doing the same work, but they are based in another part of the world, they shouldn't, be charging so much. And it was a blessing in disguise because it did, eventually inspire me to start something called Skills Over Skin, which is like a free Facebook community, and it's open to all women around the world, and they're free to join. And what I do in there is I post free tutorials, of the work that I have learned over the years, may it be client work or may it be actual negotiation skills, so stuff like that. Whatever that I have learned, whatever little, I go ahead and I share it on videos, and it's like a women. It's already more than 200 women, and it was only started like recently, like not even 3 months have passed since I started it. So that was like really good because the entire mission behind that community is that the color of your skin doesn't matter. It's your skills. So it's skills over skin. So that's where that comes from. And yeah, other than that, I think, like you said, imposter syndrome is pretty much a constant because I'm so much younger than most of my peers in the industry. So yeah, I always have that, I'm charging for this. Like, do I even know? And even though I've done it 100 times before, there's always that nervousness, before a new client meeting for a potential client. You're always like, okay, do I know my stuff? Even though I know it. So yeah, that feeling is still something that I'm learning to tackle. But yeah.
Wow, I'm so glad you actually talked about that because I think that is it's a misnomer, but then also an expectation that the world has given us in the business world. And it's not, it's a factual thing, quite frankly, but unfortunately it's turning from facts to stereotypical also. And, first of all, I did not know about this Facebook group. I want to be a part of it. And I want to support you. And so it's called Skills Over Skin.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love that you took this issue and made it into a teachable moment, and not just teachable, but others are also, I'm assuming, sharing their skills and talking about some of the things that they do as well, which is so fantastic to have that kind of a network of sisterhood. And it's just women, or is it open to everybody before?
Yeah, it's just for women mainly because I work with female entrepreneurs, so like that's people that I could connect with better personally. So
I love it. Well, we're going to be putting the link to that, which you will be putting the link to that.
right.
And I also want to join it. That's so fantastic. But you're right. And it's the thing, like, even when I'm also trying to find some other things in my business, just like tech stuff and like and other things with my website and whatever, crazy plans I have in my brain. A lot of times I'll be told, hey, go to India and find people, or, XYZ place and find people because it's going to be cheaper. And while that might be true, but I think walking into the room, having an expectation of something being literally 90% cheaper is also not fair, because those people have the skill sets, they have the ability to do really well, and not just well technically, but also with their work ethic. It's really amazing. And so I think, like, we should be paying for the value that we're getting, and not only because of geographical locations. And of course, negotiation is there. You don't have to like sit and be like, okay, whatever. But I think also negating something from the get-go is not a good habit either. So thanks for sharing that. Actually, that can be daunting at times and a hurdle to overcome as well, because I think sometimes people come with that being the number one reason that could be a make or break situation for that client as well.
Right.
Amazing. Well, I know that in 2020 we talked about how I started the podcast, and I have a lot of people now. We're starting season 3, which is another reason why I wanted to have you both here, because I wanted everyone to know the women behind the scenes, the team behind the scenes, because it seems like easy when you're listening to something or watching something on YouTube, but quite frankly, it's not easy. We're a well-oiled machine now because we've been doing it so much, but it's definitely not as easy as it might seem. And I also get a lot of guests or even clients of mine asking me, hey, we're wanting to start a podcast. How did you do it? And I truly can only tell them what I did per se, but I can't really go into the nitty gritty of what Jamie does or what Tanishka does. So I really wanted to take this opportunity today to have that conversation on how to start a podcast. I think, Jamie, you were there in the beginning days of my planning and ideas and ideating and all this stuff. And I think
one of the best things that my coach, Lonnie Jackson, she has suggested, hey, number one, you want a theme for your podcast. Like, let's just start from the basics. What is the theme of your podcast? What is the objective of your podcast? What are you trying to ultimately achieve? The results that you're ultimately trying to achieve. So whether that is making money or whether that is just sharing information and knowledge, what is it? And then also having a lineup of people that you want to invite as guests on your podcast and reach out to them and then and I'm giving really high level bullet points right now, but it's just kind of like having a lineup, having a, pitch letter that Jamie and I have developed over time, which is templates that we have. However, one of the key points of these templates is that it's a template that is personalized for every single guest. I truly believe in that. And I know there are times when I'll send an email back to Jamie saying, nope, we need to personalize this more. This isn't good enough for me. And the reason is because I want the person receiving that email to know that we have thought about it. There's intention behind the invitation. And also, we truly love what they do. And that's why they're invited to be on the show. And so having the lineup, having those templates written out and actually researching, your guest, but then recording in advance a good chunk, at least like 8 episodes, is really helpful because then usually you're 2 months ahead of time now. But that's all my part. Like that was all me. That was the stuff I was kind of doing, and we can kind of like go into the details of that as well. But when we first started, we were having these conversations. And then Jamie, let's begin from the beginning in the sense of when you are researching guests, what are you doing and how are you doing that?
Well, I try to find guests, obviously, we have to find ones that are a good fit for the show that kind of go with who your audience is. So some of the tips that I do for trying to find those guests is look at other podcasts that you have been on or you enjoy following that are kind of your similar audience there. And I'll look at the different guests that have been on there and start researching them from that point and see who would be a good fit. So that's always a good place to start, is looking at podcasts that you enjoy or that you know that are kind of similar to what the type of podcast that you want to have, because you can find a lot of guests that way that might have good topics and everything that you enjoy. And then from there, I'll listen to that podcast episode, see what they are saying, what kind of topics they're bringing. And then from there, I'll research them even more. I'll go to their website, their Facebook, Instagram, see what they're about, what their message is, different topics they might be able to bring to the table, and just go from there. Then I'm able to have more information on them to put in those emails to really personalize it and everything, because I've gone through their website, I've looked at their podcasts. Or even a lot of them even will have podcasts of their own. So then you can kind of, go to that podcast and again, look for other guests that may have been on that guest podcast. So there's different ways to find guests and everything by using other people's podcasts.
That's such a great tip, because initially people are wondering, how do we get podcast guests, and generally you reach out to, like we did, we also reached out to our contacts, all of our contacts that we had, all of the people that I have connected with at conferences, or, just somehow or the other we've connected at some point in time. And that was really helpful as well. But then there is a finite number of connections that you can make on that level. And so I love that you do that, because not only do you go to, if my guests have a podcast, you go to their podcast and see their guests, but you also go and see where they have also spoken in other podcasts as well. And so there's so many different connections that you can make, and then it makes the guest list limitless, because you've just opened so many doors out there for that. And so that is such a golden tip right there. I just love it, because there are times when you're just like, I just don't know. I don't know who to invite anymore. I'm just so confused on this. And, having that, just the resource of literally at your fingertips. You don't have to buy into a database. You don't have to spend extra money with regards to paying somebody else to find it for you. And I also know, so, going to your contacts that you have, and then going to all of their contacts or the places that they have spoken, and, or who they know and where they've appeared. But then another great tip is also joining in on these Facebook groups right? Like we did that too, Jamie, right? We joined
Mhm.
Facebook groups and other like podcast groups where you're not necessarily
Right.
paying to be in it, and they'll send you emails and they'll send you suggestions on who to have on your podcast as well.
Right. Yeah, those are really good as well. Another thing is just to sit down and write a list of different industries that you might want on your podcast. So that's what we do, we'll do with things. Hey, what about wedding planners? What about photographers? What about, accountants or CPAs, or, how to get into real estate investing? And then from that point, I'll go on LinkedIn and Facebook and just, even Google and start Googling that. And if it's something where you just want women in that, then look up, different women in those industries and start researching them and see, going to their websites, seeing if they have done previous speaking, or if just, just their message, or if they're geared towards women. There's a lot of different research you can do on that by just writing out a list of different people you would like on your podcast and those different topics, and then going and reaching out to those people that you've looked, on LinkedIn or Google or Facebook groups or anything like that.
I love that. Great tips, because sometimes just finding a guest is one of the biggest struggles. And you're right. We talk on a weekly basis, we connect, we have those conversations, and then we ideate and brainstorm together, which I think is really helpful as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just going through the different, like, it's like this, and then like all the tentacles are coming out of it. So that's so true. So now after we find the guest and we're like, this is solid, we truly love this person. I know you were mentioning earlier that you go in, or I do it, but not as much as you do, but like we'll go in and research the guests, where they've been, and then come back, and then, we pitch to them at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can share with me some of the elements of that pitch letter that are super important?
Well, obviously, we want to personalize it as much as possible, and tell them why we want them on our podcast, not just, hey, come on our podcast. We want to say, hey, we've seen you on this podcast, or we've been, following you on Instagram or LinkedIn, and we've seen these topics that you have talked about, and we feel like they would be a good fit for our audience. And in that, we also, want to include kind of a bio, telling them about you, telling them about the podcast. We also usually include our pitch kit that we've come up with and everything, just showing more about the podcast as to why they would want to be on it and what they can offer to our audience and everything. So having all of that on there for them, I feel like, is a really good way to reach them and let them know that they've got it all there. They can look at all of the podcasts and know more information about it. They don't have to go researching us like we did for them. Yeah. And then letting them know that it's not just a template. Like some of that, about the podcast and all of that might be the template, but we have done our research and not just picking anybody and everybody that we can get to be on the podcast. We actually did a lot of work and really feel like they would be perfect for the show. Another tip that I have for when you're reaching out to podcast guests is to not be afraid to reach out to people that you feel like are too big for your podcast. A lot of times people are too afraid, going, okay, no, they're too big of a name, or my podcast is too tiny, I'm not ready for that, or I don't know if I could even be a good, how would I interview them? Go ahead and reach out to them. I mean, the no is the same from someone that's really big and you really respect, as opposed to someone that's just starting out. A no is a no, and it doesn't reflect you or your podcast at all. So I always just say, throw it out there. What's the worst that can happen is you get a no. The best that can happen is you get to interview the guest that you didn't think that would be on your show. So don't be afraid to take that leap, because it doesn't hurt to try.
I completely 110% agree with you. Like, we have reached out to people that were really like, you're like, why? But that's okay. Let's just do it. And hand in hand with that, you never know when they're in a promotion season. They might be promoting something of their own. They might be launching something of their own. And so at times you've just hit the metal when it's hot, and it's like the perfect time for them to just be there and give exposure to their product and marketing to their product. And honestly, like podcast recordings, guest recordings there, ultimately it's free. Aside from the time that you're putting into being there as a guest, or talking, that time is definitely worth something. But other than that, you're not paying to be on that podcast, most likely. And you're not paying for that connection also, most likely. So it's really a win-win situation, especially if they're in launch mode or promotion mode. And so I think that's another thing to just kind of keep in mind when you are researching and seeing what's brewing in certain people's businesses at that point. I love that. And that's so true. And I'm glad you talked about the media kit because I kind of forgot about it. But we actually, yes, you're right. Aside from the template that you write, I encourage, everyone to kind of have a working template because it truly makes the system easier. It makes the workflow easier. But what you have to do is personalize it. Whenever I get something, and I don't know about you all, but when I get something in my email and it just seems like literally a copy paste, I don't even read it. I delete it. Because I don't have the time to sit and read that copy paste thing. But when someone has taken effort to send you an email, whether or not you're going to move forward in that collaboration, they do deserve a response. And I love that because it takes a lot of courage to send an email out, especially when it's cold call emails, And I think having that personalization is important. Having a template that you can insert the personalization also is very important. Having a media kit that tells them about you so they don't have to research you is brilliant. And on top of that, another couple things that we include is if they've said yes, then we have a link that they can immediately sign into and schedule the podcast with us. And then following that link at the same time, there's a guest release form, which I absolutely think everyone should have. And then also a information questionnaire. So we get better information about them and something else that we just may not know about them. And so that makes the workflow of onboarding that guest super easy. And now it's again become an easy thing. And then of course, in the back end, we do Asana, which actually only you do Asana. And then just for organization purposes, and then you're also managing getting their headshots and getting the graphics put together. But before we get to the graphics, then we get to Tanishka at that point. And that's where Tanishka, you come in to play, because after we have done the recording and all of that's done, now we're at the end of recording, and now we're at the point where okay, recording is done. Just quickly on the recording part of it, I actually do it on Zoom. And I have a Yeti microphone, which I kind of love. And I literally have a ring light. And that's it. That's kind of all I use. I know some people put the earbud things in their ears. I personally don't like them. I think we're okay without it. So those are some of the things that we do. And plus, I record it on my computer. I don't record it on the cloud because I've realized that when I record via Zoom on cloud, it just pops as you speak and not the full screen like you'd be seeing today on this episode as well. And so things that you learn as you go through the process, the trials and errors of it. But now that we've done the recording and I've saved it to my computer and then I've uploaded it to a Google Doc that we all share together. And this Google Doc has the raw edit, the videos, and then it has all this other information on it as well. That's when Tanishka can actually go into the Google Doc and take that video and edit it. And so Tanishka, now tell us, what do you do?
Alright, so of course it starts from downloading the raw file, and we have a pretty organized running spreadsheet where we organize all of our guests, what episode is supposed to be next. So we go in there, we refer to, what guest is supposed to be on next week, and we have a pretty systematic timeline for all of this stuff. So we have our days that, this is when I need to deliver this by, and then, Jamie ma'am takes it from there, and then the guest gets an email and everything. So it's pretty important to have that timeline as well, so when you're supposed to be giving something, internally when your submissions are due. So you get the raw episode, and I start editing it because Law Chat with Girija particularly is available on both video as well as audio formats. I use a video editor, and then later on I just export the audio file as well from the same edit. So that makes your job simpler as an editor, and so you go ahead and you start editing. Now with edits, the most important thing is that this is something that I used to struggle with as well. So you want to edit out all of the stutters and errors, but don't do it to the extent where it sounds robotic. You of course want to take out all of the extras, and all of that, but don't do it to the point where it's like a straight recording where it feels like you're listening to Siri talking. Don't make it that robotic. And other than that, make your marketing material. So what I do is, all of the audiograms that we have, the quotes that we have, the show notes, I'm pretty specific about the show notes. We don't just do timestamps on this podcast. We actually go ahead and do pretty detailed show notes. And that is one of the reasons that I can do such detailed show notes is that I don't wait until the end of the edit to write my show notes. I keep jotting them down as I'm editing the episode so that, I don't have to come back to that. And that's such a great time saver as well to create your marketing material as you are editing the episodes. If I hear something that's like really quote worthy, that, oh, this is such a nice one liner, we can use it as a quote, I'm going to go ahead and note it down right then and there. And when the guest is speaking and they say something that's really inspiring, which I know is going to entice the audience to listen to the full episode, I go ahead and I mark those timestamps that, okay, from this point in the episode to this point in the episode, I want to extract this later on for an audiogram, so that I don't have to go back and listen to the completed edit when I can do it for the first time, right? And similarly with the video promos as well, we do like a really cool movie style teaser, sometimes for reels, sometimes for stories. So, mark all of that while you're at it, so that it's much more simpler for you as an editor to go ahead and make all of the marketing materials once the actual episode is done. And another thing that I really have to focus on is, just because, like Girija ma'am said, she's using a Yeti mic. I'm using my AirPods. Jimmy ma'am is using something else. So it's not always necessary that your volume syncs with the volume of the guest that you have on. So you also have to make sure that the volume throughout the episode is pretty consistent, because when the end listener, your audience, when they are listening to the episode, you don't want them to continuously be adjusting the volume when they're listening, because that's going to make them opt out. So make sure that the volume is consistent throughout the episode. If your volume is at a particular pitch and your guest is sounding, like if their volume is less or more, make sure that it's adjusted throughout the episode so that it's easier for the listener and they don't have to adjust. Similarly with the music as well, a lot of podcasters, what they do is their music can be overpowering, so when you are playing a music, play it, but make sure that it's mellow enough that your voice, like, it's not overpowering your voice. So these are just some things to keep in mind. And once all of that is ready, the next part is to set it up for actual publishing. So all of the marketing material goes ahead and we create a PR kit where both Jamie ma'am and I create different assets, different types of graphics. We both create and we put them in there. And that is the kit that also goes out to the guest, which Jamie ma'am can talk more about. But on my end, what I do is I schedule the episode on our podcast platform, which is Libsyn. And then we also do a video cast, which if you guys are not already listening, you should, because we're pretty awesome like that. So go on YouTube, check us out there. So we also have a YouTube channel where a video episode also goes live each week. So we schedule it on both of the platforms. And from there, we have a working system on Trello where I go ahead and I tag both Girija ma'am and Jamie ma'am that, hey, the episode is ready and this is the folder for the episode. From there, Jamie ma'am takes it and, she sends it forward to the guest for promotion.
Wow, lots of information packed into that. And so I'm going to break it down just a little bit some more. And so some of the tools that we are using, one is Libsyn, right? And so what does that do?
So basically, Libsyn is a podcast directory, and Libsyn is a paid one where you have to pay certain dollars each month to get certain bandwidth. So I think we are on the plus plan because our episodes are usually longer, so we need more bandwidth to upload them. But they start for as little as $5. And if you're someone who wants to do a podcast but you don't have the budget to just invest in a podcast directly right away, there's something called Anchor.fm, which is literally free. It's a tool by Spotify, and it's free. You don't need to pay anything, and in fact, you can also get sponsorships on that platform. Of course, it pays little, but it's still sponsorships. It's still money that you're getting simply from uploading an episode. So, it's several podcast directories are available. There's Buzzsprout, there's Libsyn. These two are the major players. And then for someone who doesn't want to invest right away, you can go for Anchor, which is like a free podcast directory.
Love that. And then what are some other tools that we use? We have music we get from, what do we use for music again?
So for the signature music that we have on our podcast, it's a lossless audio that we got from a royalty-free website. Again, this is very important. If you're using music from the internet, make sure that you actually have the right to use it. It should be royalty-free, because if not, you might get a copyright strike, especially on YouTube. If you get a copyright claim or a copyright strike, you can't really monetize that video anymore. And for a copyright strike, your entire channel can go in danger for that. So make sure that you are always using music that you're allowed to use. Thematic is a great platform for that. So it's Hello Thematic Music. If you search royalty free music thematic, you will find lots of audios, paid and free audios. And the only requirement that they have there is that you credit the artist who's created that music. So I think that's pretty basic. If you're not paying for something, if you're getting something for free, the least you can do is you can mention their name in the description that this is the person that we've gotten the music from. So yeah, there are a lot of platforms that offer free royalty free music. So just make sure that whatever music that you're using for your podcast, you are actually allowed to use it. Otherwise, it can be a little that for your channel altogether, your podcast altogether. And then the other tool for editing, we use iMovie because the editing for the podcast episodes is pretty basic. You don't need a lot of transitions or pop-ups going on. It's pretty basic. So we use iMovie for that. And for all of our graphics, we use Canva.
Yeah, I'm so glad you talked about the music and the royalty free concept and the license to use it. So royalty free just means you're not paying them either every time you use the music or other form of royalty that you might be giving them. But whether it's a free music or whether it's paid music, what you want to do is really look into the licensing agreement and make sure the licensing agreement permits you to use it for purposes of your podcast. And also, what are the permissible usages? So sometimes they might be, yeah, you can use it as long as you're not monetizing it, or you can use it for whatever purpose you want to use it. So just make sure you read that licensing agreement and not just pick up any song from the internet, because man, they literally are tight on that, and they will slap you with a non-usage or something like that, and then it just becomes a waste of a lot of money at that point in time. So great point. And yes, we do have some other tools like what Tanishka was saying that we use to make sure that we can properly edit the podcast and publish the podcast as well. So there are a couple of tools that you need in order to do that. And then of course, getting it out onto the platforms. I think Apple's the only one you kind of have to register for or sign up or something. And then it gives you a few days. Tanishka, what is the deal with Apple? I forgot.
Yeah. So basically, this is called Rss Feed Registration for platforms, major platforms like Google, Apple, and Spotify. Basically, when you sign up for, let's just say, example, you set up your podcast on Libsyn, it's going to give you an RSS feed. This is basically a link that you then go ahead and submit onto Apple, Spotify, Google, and then these are going to take a couple of days to verify that okay, this podcast is legit, and they are going to see that all of the details that you've given they're right, because they're going to ask does this have any, like, is this podcast for children or not, is it safe for children or not, does this have any age restrictions or not. You have to give in all of those details, and then they are going to go ahead and verify it with your RSS feed. You're given a simple link, you just have to go ahead and submit it, and on these different platforms, and then once it's all set up, you will get an email confirming that okay, your RSS feed has been verified and your podcast is now available to stream on our platform. So that's called an RSS feed registration.
Wonderful. And I think if you are having a launch date, you need to make sure that that is done at least minimum 2 weeks in advance. You're ready to rock and roll. Otherwise, you can be delayed because of that small minor detail. So I love that. So now we have the podcast is ready to go. It's about to get published, or it's in the pipeline for publishing. Now we go back to the next link, which is now coming back to Jamie's side of the work. And so we have some of the graphics ready to go because we have templates for the graphics that we use for our promotions and our marketing. And so Jamie, what do you do now once the podcast is ready to rock and roll?
Well, once it's ready to go, I will, use the graphics and everything that we've already have the templates for, but change it up, obviously, with the guest picture, podcast name and number and everything. And then I make different graphics. So we have graphics for Facebook. They can use for Facebook and LinkedIn, and then ones for Instagram. And there's several different ones that we have. And I will do all of those that we upload to the Google Drive and everything that we already have for the show notes and all of the different video graphics and things like that Tanishka has made. And then we'll also do kind of a template for them to use, just a little snippet. So if they don't have time to type up something to promote the episode, they can use the one that we've done for them. And then we send all of that to the guest before the podcast airs. So that way they can promote it to their audience and everything as well. Just try to make it as simple and easy for them to be able to promote the episode and not be, super complicated, have everything there for them with the graphics and those little snippets there.
Yes, and I think it truly is very helpful to send that information out to them in advance. Most of the times we receive a huge thank you and an excitement for them. And so it's really helpful, and it kind of, places that period perfectly, because now you know that you've helped them to promote, and you want them to promote also, so that way more people have exposure to your podcast and there's more recognition, plus subscribership or listenership as well. And so this process definitely has a lot of different links to it. But once you start putting the links together, it also will become a well-oiled machine at the end of the day. There might be some little hiccups along the way, but those hiccups can be resolved as time goes by as well. And so I love the process because I feel like, having a podcast is not an easy task, but I also believe that, we've done a good job in really simplifying it, and the workflow has become very easy as well. So now we have the podcast published, and there are times when people wanted to monetize this podcast. I don't monetize it. My podcast purpose is really to share the knowledge. It's another gateway to the law, and also a gateway for entrepreneurs to get mentorship for storytelling. But I know monetization is important to some people because they do need to make sure that it's viable and profitable at the end of the day. So share with me some ways on how to make it profitable, Tanishka.
Right. So the simplest way to get a sponsor for your podcast is to simply reach out to the brand that you believe is going to be a relevant sponsor. For example, your podcast, Mentorship to Storytelling for Entrepreneurs, right? So if there's an institute that's offering a digital business acceleration program, that's a relevant sponsor to you because your listeners are entrepreneurs and they want to know more about entrepreneurship, right? So the simplest thing, the worst that could happen is they're going to be telling you that, oh, we're not looking at sponsorships right now, we don't want to invest in advertising right now, and that's okay. But it's all about just reaching out, and again, what you do with guests, you personalize it and you actually show that you made an effort to research them. The same thing you want to do with your sponsors is that you want to show an effort that, okay, you've done your research and you have a solid reasoning behind why you want them to be a sponsor, and that you're not just looking for random sponsors, but that you can actually add value as a sponsor. So that's the first thing. The next thing that you can do is also, a lot of times you don't realize this, but your guests, a lot of times they might want to advertise with you because, if they're coming on as a guest, they've already seen the potential in your podcast. They've seen the listenership. They know that you have a good audience. They know that your audience is relevant to them because that's why they're coming on, right? Because they want exposure in front of your audience, and an advertisement can help them. So simply, it's just adding that additional question in your guest onboarding questionnaire that, hey, we also have sponsorships. If you want to advertise with us, we can do that. And, reach out to us at this email, or simply take a yes, and then we'll reach out with more details about the sponsorship. Such a simple step to integrate into your onboarding process, but it goes such a long way. And then there's also platforms like one that I really like is Podcon. It's PODCORN, podcon.com, which is like really good. There's so many different types of sponsorships, and they ask you so many details that, are you looking to place the ad at the beginning of the episode, in between the episode, at the end of the episode? Because these factors, of course, determine how much you get paid for the sponsorship. So they will ask you, they'll ask about your listenership and all of those details. And you just have to link your RSS feed once with them, and, all of that data goes automatically to every single sponsor that you apply for sponsorship to. And it's so simple, but you just have to show that effort. Like, personalization is key in every sponsorship deal that you're ever going to get, because you need to show the other person why their podcast is the best place for you to advertise. And another thing that you can do is also you can join Facebook groups for podcasters, because a lot of times, even if there are not direct sponsorship opportunities, there's a lot of resources being shared about how you can get sponsorships, because Podcon is one of the places that I discovered on one of these podcasting groups on Facebook. So it's always helpful. If nothing else, you have a community of the people who are on the same journey as you.
Love those tips. They're so helpful. And yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it can be scary. Like, why would somebody want to do my podcast? So why would they want to sponsor it? Sponsorship levels can be as low as you want or as high as you want. So you can start with, a very minimal amount, but just enough to kind of even feel the waters out. And then incrementally you can grow it out. And I love the idea of integrating that question into your onboarding process, because it's literally just an extra question on that Google form. And I've actually seen somebody where they sent me the Google form, but it even went into extra steps where, would you like to sponsor? And then they gave me the price breakdown if I wanted to, and then which one I opted for. The only concern I have with that is that sometimes people are just not ready at that point in time, or they may not even have their material ready if there is a request to upload that material at that point in time as well.
Right. It's always actually more efficient to simply, reach out to them, because you also don't want to burden your guest with unnecessary details. Like, if they don't want to advertise, they don't even want to go through the effort of reading your price brackets and everything, right? So it could be as simple as, like, If you are interested, just take yes and we'll reach out. If not, no worries. There's no strings attached. Simply, so don't burden them with, because that's a whole extra process, right? Getting a sponsorship deck ready is a whole different thing. You want to send them your listenership, you want to send them your statistics, all of that. So you don't want to necessarily incorporate all of those extra details onto your onboarding form, but simply that if you are interested, we could reach out with more details, and you don't have to commit. Just because you're taking a yes doesn't mean you're bound to sponsor us. No, we'll share more details, and then you can see if this is a good fit for you. So make it more simple.
Love it. Simplicity is the best. And I think we have really achieved the simple way of getting it all done. The easy way, I say easy very like loosely, but not easy, but it's become where our automations are really in place and they're really done well. So the workflow is easier for us. And the podcast doesn't necessarily burden all the other tasks that we have on our table as well. But again, thank you so much, Tanishka and Jamie, for sharing your tips on PR, sharing your tips on, getting that podcast ready to go, and just overall how to start a profitable podcast. And thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your wisdom and insights. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm just so grateful for both of you.
Yay, thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining Law Chat with Girija. I just love these kind of conversations that are motivating, inspiring, but truthful, raw, and honest about all of the challenges, all of the victories, all of the triumphs, picking ourselves back up again. I just can't think of a better way to get mentorship but Law Chat with Girija. If this was helpful to you or this was inspiring to you, please share the love. You can give this video a thumbs up. You can subscribe to this channel. You can also share this with your community by taking a screenshot and posting it on your social media and tagging GBP Law. When you do that, a lot more people will be able to see this video that not only benefited you, but also can benefit them as well. So let's share that love and let's share that inspiration. And if you want more information about what I do and other resources, go check out gbplaw.com or yourcontractbuddy.com. And I look forward to seeing you next time.